crowd, welcome back inside Depart for May for podcast 907. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camera. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
Hey, it couldn't hurt, you know? Why not? Hey, tonight, for your kind consideration, we're going to talk about Formula One news. Going to talk about the Ute in Formula One and other things. So stay tuned for that. I think you'll enjoy the conversation. But before having that conversation, of course, I have to introduce my co-host. That means I got to go all the way to the right coast of our country, nestled in the nation's capital, where she applies her skills as a master statistician and the owner of the world's largest cat tree. You know her, you love her, the lovely, the redoubtable, Grace. How you doing, Grace?
I'm doing pretty good, Todd. How are you doing?
I am doing well. I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. Thank you for caring, Grace.
Yes, like Carlos Sainz. Thanks for asking. I'm doing okay.
Yes, thank you. Yes, exactly.
No, things are here. There's currently no cats in the cat tree, but we'll see how long that lasts.
You never know.
It's only a matter of time.
It's a matter of time. It's exactly right. It's just like Bobby Epstein at Coda saying, hey, I get it that Dan's not driving, but he's such a magnet to the American audience that he should come to Austin anyway.
Yeah.
Why not?
It would be better.
It would be better.
You know what? He could be a better Gunther Steiner, right? Like,
yeah.
He could actually be informative and useful, and just give him a mic and let him walk around.
Give him a mic. Yeah.
So.
Let him do a Ted's Notebook.
Let them do it together. That would be great.
That would be good. That'd be hilarious.
I think he could just hide behind some bushes and Ted would find him. I mean, Ted always finds the most esoteric,
doesn't he?
Thing, you know? And it's like, I didn't know about this, Ted. Thanks for filling me in.
I bet Ted, 50% of the randos he engages he wish he hadn't, and the other 50% he's glad he did. You know, it's probably a 50-50.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably true. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't pan out. Or
right.
People, and I'm sure it's true, too, because if you don't know who he is or what he's doing, it would just be bizarre. Like, you're just a person walking around the paddock, minding your own business, and this guy's just like, oh, are you eating vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream? Right. I heard the strawberry's really good, and you're like, what? Yeah, so, I mean, I think that's part of it, too, is that people are just like, I don't know who you are. It's kind of like Martin Brundle's grid walks, right? But it's kind of just like, who's this guy, right?
Right.
And especially because this cameraman is like somewhere else, like right. They're not necessarily always in this together or looking at the same things.
Ted's cameraman's like 3 teams down, you know, right. And Ted's walking around with a microphone, looking at his shoes.
Yeah, and so I just think I'm sure that if people don't know who he is, it would be, and you never know. I mean, I'm always expecting like, you know, this is a joke. I'm on candid camera, right? Like, are you real? Like, what's going to happen, right?
Am I getting punked?
So, yeah, exactly. As the kids would say.
Yes.
So that's always my concern too, is that like, I don't know who you are and I don't know why you're doing this. I don't trust you.
So we're all sitting here, you know, we all somehow managed through inner strength, really. Maybe it took some inebriation, faith, whatever. But we all made it through the summer break. But here we find ourselves yet again. This isn't a break. It's not a summer break. It's just 3 weeks of no F1, right?
Yeah, you know, and I would like to note that, so we're recording a day early because last week you had mentioned, you know, hey, the Kansas City Chiefs are playing Monday night. Yeah. And I'd like to watch that game. And I was like, we should record on Sunday.
Yep.
You know when the Steelers are playing?
When?
Right now. I am the worst fan ever.
I'm so sorry about that.
No, I mean, clearly it would, I mean, right, like if I actually was paying attention, I would have known that. But I only found out this morning, and it's only because they're playing the Cowboys, and, you know, DC and Dallas have a rivalry. And so
sure they do.
Like, the Cowboys are playing the Steelers on Sunday Night Football, and I was like, well, that's great.
That's great.
So, I mean, it's totally fine. But I just thought that, like, it was humorous to me.
Funny.
That I was like, yeah, that's great. Move it for your team, but I'm not watching mine. But
right.
I mean, and I watched, you know, the Moto3 race instead of watching the afternoon game. So, you know, It's too much. It's too much is what I'm getting at. And I really, after watching the Braun GP documentary, is all the more that I was like, 12 races, 15 races.
I know.
It ends in October. That's so reasonable. Now, like next year, I can't pay attention to football now until week 7. It's almost over.
I know.
Next year it'll be week 17. I don't know. What do they play? Like to 15, 16? Yeah. And I won't be able to pay attention.
It's pretty tough if you think about it, because this time of year is, for whatever reason, we still got F1 going, right? You got MotoGP going, right? You have American football going. You have British Premier League football going. Mm-hmm. You have baseball going. You have NASCAR going. You still have IMSA going, one race left.
Right.
And it's October, so shortly hockey will be going.
That's right.
And so
basketball starts at the end of they start at Halloween.
Yeah. So right there I got eight sport. It's too much.
End of baseball, beginning of basketball.
It's too much.
I know.
It's too much.
And so I think every time they're like, we're going to extend Formula 1 and MotoGP. I'm like, no, I can't. So to bring this all the way back around, Formula 1, if we got rid of this autumn break, maybe you would end in October.
Yeah. See, that's a novel idea.
I can't. It's too many races. I have other sports I'm already committed to. I need you to end.
On behalf of all the team members that are slogging through 24 races on a calendar, I feel for you.
I mean,
that's unprecedented oppression by Formula 1 and the FIA.
When they put out the when they put out the MotoGP calendar last week at Mandalika, everybody's response, whether they were like the on-air talent kind of folks or the riders themselves, everybody's just like, we get time off, like a race in between races. There's no triple headers. It's not this like long slog right now, which is like 5 races, flyaways, just like Formula 1 does, right? Like once you leave Europe, you hit a bunch of Asian countries, and then MotoGP comes back to Valencia, but they're just like, it's too hard. It's too much. There's too many races, right? So I think when everybody says out loud, like, we're just glad that we get some downtime, like I can go home and take a nap.
Right.
That's saying something. There's too many. It's too long.
It's a lot. It is a lot. I agree. All right. Well, let's talk about some Formula 1 news. A couple articles that I read this past week I thought was kind of interesting.
We could have maybe like 2 fewer races in America, maybe. And then maybe just 1 less. Miami.
Just COTA.
I'll give Vegas another year. I mean, I think year 1, but your rookie year, we'll see what you got year 2.
Yeah.
Miami,
good point.
I'm with you.
Good point. Okay, they should get Bono and U2 just to walk around the streets in Las Vegas, giving people hugs and singing, Slim and Found.
What I'm looking for? Yeah. That's right.
That might help things. When in doubt, throw a Bono at it. I don't know.
That's just one of the. How's that never happened?
I don't know.
How's there never been a Bono, a photo together?
Yeah, where's the Bono photo op?
How's that never
like
happened?
Bono in Bono's garage.
Right, exactly. Right? Like, the other Bono is coming, right?
Yeah. Bono the Lesser is going to come and visit the garage.
Exactly. Maybe he'll bring the Edge with him. Right, exactly.
Yeah. Right. Maybe.
I think that would be great. I can't believe that's never happened.
I know. They need to set that up. Toto could pull that off.
I mean, right. I think
he's Toto effing Wolf.
I mean, Bono would be all over that. I think that you could do it in, there's enough races. I'm sure you could align with a tour, so that he wouldn't have to, travel or something. You could figure it out.
Yeah. Anthony agrees with us, by the way. By the way, huge thank you to our Patreon supporters, because we have a few in our audience, and they're chatting with us live as we're recording this. So you too can do that if you're a Patreon supporter. Don't know what the holdup is, but that's, your choice. I get it. But Anthony says he's totally with us. He goes, I love F1, but it's too much. I get that I don't have to watch it all, but that's not my relationship with F1, right? Same reason I don't like sprint weekends. There's too much. I have to watch, and the number of hours I have available. Totally agree, Anthony. Right. It's true. It's like compression of the amount of time, and it's especially And the one thing I will say, Anthony, is imagine having all that to do if you were working in the team. And even for us, all of that on top of then prepping, recording podcasts, doing all this, editing, getting everything. But, it really starts to jam that weekend up pretty quick. So I wanted to talk about, I read this story. It was an interesting story. It was about your friend and mine, Franco Colapinto.
And we're tight.
We're like this. We're actually like this, Franco and I. So no doubt he's impressed the paddock, right? No doubt. That kind of goes without saying. But to back up a bit with, the economic struggles that Argentina is going through, they get a new president. Maybe they can turn things around. Who knows? You be the judge on that. But the one thing that Argentina kind of does have right now is an F1 driver, Franco Colapinto, and they're really excited about him, and they should be, right? And that can't hurt things and morale and all that stuff for the Argentine crowd. And so that's really good. Argentina does have a history in Formula One. Remember, there's Messi in football, right? But there's a lot of sports figures, terrific sports figures coming out of Argentina, Messi being one of them. But they also have that history in F1. They've got they had a race there from 1958 through 1990. Eight. Certainly Fangio, a legend of the sport, one of the all-time goats, right? You also had Carlos Reutemann, great driver. If you can go back and watch some of Carlos Reutemann's races, he's great. And then you had that brief moment that Grace and I are so in touch with when Gaston Mazzacani was racing in 2000, 2001. We followed every inch of his career.
Absolutely.
But since then, it's been 23 years in Argentina. There's been no Argentina driver race, right? So they're excited about that, as they should. And Franco has done a terrific job recently. He had that P8 and scored points for Williams, and few really saw that coming as a quick mid-season replacement for Logan Sargent. I think that's been the wonder of the whole thing. He just jumped in and instantly was on Alex Albon's tailpipe, right?
It made like, I remember I'm very against the mid-season changing drivers idea.
Yeah.
And then it was like, why didn't you do this 6 races?
Why'd you wait so long?
Right.
I know. He did really well. Now there's a talk of even bringing an F1 race back to Argentina. There's some folks down in Argentina said that they're sure that the government's engaged in having those conversations about bringing back. I don't know, is that cart before the horse? I don't know. Might want to see if Franco gets a permanent seat before you go all in. But fair enough, an F1 race.
Formula One.
It's Formula One. That's right. It's
your
the world.
Back to your office.
It's the world's premier motorsport.
Yes.
So anyway, who knows? That would be kind of cool. And as of now, though, he is without a drive in 2025. And many have suggested that Williams ought to loan him to Sauber. But Sauber certainly must have their own ideas on this. And other rumors say that Sauber is very kind of keen to, Mattia Binotto very keen to retain Valtteri Bottas, his teammate to Nico Hülkenberg.
And who wants to be in bed with Ferrari over something, or Red Bull like that? Nobody.
Red Bull.
I mean, if you said to me, I meant Red Bull. It was because you said Binotto made me think Ferrari. That's going to happen a lot next season, so just prepare yourselves, people. Yeah. I mean, I just now started to stop calling them McLaren Mercedes, all right? It's hard for me. But anyway, Red Bull, nobody wants that. That happened with Albon, right, at Williams, right?
Oh, well, I was talking about Sauber, though.
I know, but I'm talking about Red Bull. That nobody wants to be in bed with Red Bull. I wouldn't want to make that deal of wow, Red Bull's going to loan me their driver. I'm not doing that. Maybe another team, I might believe you. If it was Mercedes, that I was borrowing a driver from Mercedes, maybe I'd be okay with that. Red Bull, no way.
Well, he's coming from Williams, though, right? So maybe Williams is a kinder, gentler borrower than Red Bull might be. Yeah. But
I just wouldn't. Red Bull moves their drivers around too much too fast that I would ever.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and I'm going to talk about Red Bull after that because I do think you bring up a good point about their options and how they're moving chess pieces. They're like Magnus, whatever his name is, the number one world chess champion.
Chess guy, yeah.
Shows up 10 minutes late. His clock's already ticking. That's some panache, isn't it? He's awesome.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah, he's amazing. So you've got Valtteri. So if you're Sauber and you're Mattia Binotto,
right?
There's all of these things behind why you would keep Valtteri, right? He's already on the
100%.
payroll. We can get him cheap. If I wanted Calapinto, I'd have to pay a fortune to Williams. Who knows? I don't know what they'd want for them. Do I want all this stuff? I've got Nico. Calapinto would just be over here, keeping his driving shops good. How's that help me? Because he's going to go back to Williams eventually. That whole thing. It's a whole conversation that Sauber would have to have, and I get all that. So I don't know that that's an option, and I don't know that it's not an option, but that's one of the suggestions. I will say I'd be surprised if they stuck with Valtteri, but that's just me. Use him as a transition.
Yeah. Which isn't what he's gonna want, right?
No.
Bottas, just like Alonso, is like, no, 3 years or nothing, right? He's not gonna want to sign for 1 year. But if it was up to me, I'd sign you for 1 year.
Right. Yeah, I agree. But that's just my opinion. And you know what my opinion means? Nothing.
On this podcast, it matters a lot, Tom.
Yeah, right. So now, having said that about a short list, I'm sure Sauber has their own short list of who they want, but money does tend to make a short list even shorter, right? It can. So time will tell who they'll put in that seat. It's a tough situation that F1 finds itself in with when you think of Fernando, Nico, Valtteri, Lewis, Sergio, all of these are veteran drivers and they all have seats, right? And then you've got Ollie Behrman, you've got Liam Lawson, you've got Calapinto, you got Kimi Antonelli, got all these young guys wanting the seats. And it's always, and this isn't nothing new to Formula One. This has always been kind of the case as generations ebb and flow through the series. And, some of the great drivers that we all know and love, like Dan, they end up with no chair when the music stops. Right. And so that's always difficult from that standpoint. But I think, this is a question, do they stick with experience or do they go with youth? That's the age-old question. That's always a difficult one to answer, and a lot of things hinge on where the team is at and what they're trying to do, short, medium, and long term. Regardless, Franco has certainly made an impression, and many believe he deserves a seat next year. And the same, those are the same people that are saying that Kimi Antonelli deserves it too. Well, he's getting a seat. He's getting a top seat at Mercedes. So, and we saw Liam, right? At Red Bull, he's getting a seat. We saw him in last year sitting in, and it makes you wonder now how many of these other young drivers are out there who could make such an impact in F1. Sure, there's several out there who will unfortunately go the way that Logan Sargent went, but there are some out there. Certainly, Calapinto is potentially one of them. Some, watching Ollie Behrman, I think he acquitted himself well. Kimi, we haven't really seen him. He just put it in the wall. Liam Lawson certainly acquitted himself well last year when he sat in for Dan. So how many of these other drivers out there that could come in and show they're absolutely fit for purpose in F1 and that are languishing as reserve drivers doing some work and that kind of stuff? It's a difficult situation for F1 and teams in a sense there. And some of these young drivers are all under the Mercedes program or the Red Bull program or the Ferrari program. You're right. They're all kind of earmarked. And that's sort of I guess, Grace, that's sort of like a necessary evil, if you will. So take like Kimi Antonelli or one of the Ferrari junior drivers like Ollie or whatever, they get snatched up by these major teams. They're a development driver in junior series. They need that team's backing to support it for the cash it takes to drive and for the connections to good cars in F3 and F2 and those kind of things, and the hopes one day slotting into the big dance in Formula One. But when they have drivers like Leclerc and Lewis, they're not going to be a seat there for a while. And so these young drivers who have been supported by these teams all along, they get there and there's no room at the end, right? And it's like with Calapinto, all this time he's been slogging away as a junior driver, going through the series. He's with Williams. Great, we're going to get rid of Logan. So, oh, by the way, we just hired Carlos. Sorry.
Right.
You know, it's always a tough thing. And I feel for these young drivers that need that team support, need it to get to that opportunity, Formula One, and then the door, you know, you end up seeing Alex Albon just saying, well, the hell with this. I'm going to find an open team and I'm moving out of Red Bull. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think one point. So you were talking about Argentina first. They do their MotoGP is going back. I know that MotoGP has gone in the past and then they canceled, I think, the last 2 years, right? So they're on the calendar currently for 2025. So I'm not sure if it's the same track, and I'm not sure if it is.
Where was it? It was in Buenos Aires, wasn't it?
There was a point this morning when I reviewed the notes and I thought, I should look that up. I did not. Surprise. Very prepared for the show as always. But I'm just saying that I think that there's been some political misgivings. I don't know what the right word is, that people really were kind of like, we like Argentina, but we're not going to go back there. And I wonder what Rally's done as well. They used to have a rally in Argentina. I don't know if they've continued that or not. But I think that it is good to bring in a country that has a history that, you know, supports motorcycle racing. So to me, I think supporting Formula One, to me, if you support one, supporting the other isn't, you know, a big leap, right? So there's space for that. People are interested in it. And I know for MotoGP, they come from all over South America, not just Argentina. So I would imagine that would be good for Formula One, whether or not you have Calapinto or not. If that's a gateway to get you into Argentina, that would be great. And then, is it the same track? I can't.
It's Autodromo Oscar Alfredo Galvez.
Mm-hmm. Sure, absolutely. That
in
is
Buenos Aires. There you go.
There you go. So
how could we forget that? It's, you know, it rolls off the tongue like Hermanos Rodriguez. You know,
to do Dominicas. I don't know,
yes.
Right? So
right.
Anyway, I think that there is that possibility. I think that's a good idea for the sport, as long as the country's situation can support it. And then, so I think then talking to the young drivers, I think this is always going to be a problem in Formula One, because unlike other stick and ball sports, if you will, first of all, the equipment is the same. And you know, a football is the same unless you're playing the Patriots. Everybody's football is the same, right? Everybody's bats are the same unless you're playing the Astros, right? So I think that, but for the most part, the idea is that a player can go from one team to another. It's a little bit easier because the equipment doesn't change. But in Formula One or any sort of form of motorsports or motorcycles, you know, IndyCar, whatever, the car itself changes because none of these are spec series. Even as they're moving closer to being spec, and IndyCar is more spec than Formula One is, it's still not a spec series. And so, you know what I mean? Like, you can't just move, you know, because everybody always talks about, like, well, would Michael Schumacher done well if he would have been in a minority? Well, you can't just do that. You can't just pick up Michael Schumacher and put him in a minority, because the equipment is so different, right, from team to team. So I think that always plays a part into where these young drivers go and how you move drivers around, which is why I think that if I was in charge of stick next year, I would keep Bottas, like you said, right? Like, I think that idea of you have one person, he's already familiar, let's just keep him for a year or two, because then whoever's in the other seat, I mean, currently it's Hulkenberg, but you would know, right? You have the data, you kind of know what your stability looks like on the data sheets from race to race. But I think that that's one part of it, is that people that we face in motorsports that other sports don't face. And there's so many other things you have to fit into your equation, right?
Right,
Those young
right.
drivers have to be from countries where I need sponsors.
Right.
It's kind of like picking a VP candidate, right? Like, your main candidate hits these people, so you want your VP to hit these people over here, right?
Yeah, right.
Same idea, right? Like, so I need to get these sponsors, so I need a driver that's going to get these sponsors right here, so that I'm able to be a successful team. And that's just something that you don't have, you know, in basketball. It doesn't matter. You know, the Lakers will succeed whether LeBron brings in money or not.
Yeah, right.
Or not succeed. But, you know, it's not dependent on his money. Whereas in Formula One, it is, or any motorsport, it's
very much so.
On that young driver and where they're from and what they can bring in, whose sponsor they have. See Pastor Maldonado, right? So you can be very talented and bring a lot of money.
Even Sergio is bringing Carlos Slim money, you know.
Oh,
so,
yeah, right.
Yeah, so it doesn't really stop once you get a seat necessarily. It could be a component of the driver's contract, for that seat, right? That he's still going to continue to bring those kind of resources or backing, et cetera. So, yeah, very, very complex system that makes it incredibly challenging for any driver to get in there, even when you're part of a junior program, because the window is not always open. The seats aren't always open. And it's so much of it is luck of the draw and where things pan out, you know.
And the time in the season when they need somebody.
Yeah, it is. You think of, some of those stories like Alex, really having enough Red Bull, left Red Bull, joins Williams. Okay, so he's a back of grid, but he's driver in Formula One, right? So that's good. Now, all of a sudden, big shakeover over Williams. You get James Val, you get a serious investment. You've got a Mercedes engine. You've got some serious talent that they're poaching and bringing in. Whole different look, and all of a sudden they're starting to score points, right? So these are sometimes those moves that you can catch the trajectory as they're coming up. I think of not so much Lewis at McLaren. He joined a good team, but when he left, he kudos to Lewis because he could sense that evolution of Mercedes and where that was going, and talking to Norbert Haug and those people over there, Nikki and those people, about where they expected that team to go. So it's that timing, whereas you could point to Fernando Alonso, who seems to have that opposite timing, right?
Or Ricciardo.
Yeah, or Dan.
Very much done his career.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so it's always a very tough situation in that case, trying to determine that. Let's talk about Red Bull a little bit. You've got Red Bull's driver options, which I also think are kind of an interesting element to this too. You've got, last week we talked about Dan being out for the balance of the season in favor of Liam Lawson, and there's no doubt that Liam will be going head-to-head, with Yuki, no doubt about it, for a future Red Bull drive. That seems to be the brass ring here. Right. So no secret that Sergio's 41 points to Max's 195 points in the last 12 races. That's kind of a factor, right? To his, whether he serves the balance of his contract, which is through 2025, or whether it's over at the end of this year. I think that a lot plays into that. I suspect they may be looking elsewhere. A couple episodes ago, I mentioned that I've been advocating that George get out of Mercedes camp and move to Red Bull or Aston Martin. And while I think he should have done that already, who knows, perhaps 2026 could be a good time because his contract's up at the end of 2025. So maybe that would be a good time to move. However, one Helmut Marko.
Goodbye, good luck, and good riddance.
Yep. That Helmut Marko.
Yeah, that guy.
Has weighed in on the whole. See, I'm not the only one talking about George, how he doesn't get much love over there at Mercedes.
I don't think you sharing an opinion with Helmut Marko leans much credit to, like, I'm like, yeah, Todd, that's a good idea. Oh, Helmut Marko, I don't know, Todd.
Yeah. I know. Well, Helmut and I are like this, we're.
Yeah, right. I mean, I know him and Dominicali sit down together and listen to this podcast and take notes, right? I understand.
Right. We're buddies. We're pals.
Feeding the machine. That's what we're doing.
Yes. Well, he has weighed in on this. Here's what he said about George. I maintain that I've watched George come in. They took it forever to get him into Mercedes. He should have been in Mercedes 2 years prior. And once they finally got him in there, which was weird, especially after he sat in for Lewis and beat Valtteri and then still waited another year. So when they finally got him in there, it's been all Lewis, right? And then Lewis says he's going, and you would think now's the time that it's George's time. Nope. Yeah, good job, George. Good job. But let me tell you about Kimi Antonelli. Woohoo! They're all excited about Kimi Antonelli, right? So something is amiss. I'm telling you, I've watched enough of this Formula One for decades. I'm telling you, something is not quite at home there. So I said he should move, but here's what Helmut says. He says, quote, George Russell is on par with Hamilton in qualifying, if not faster. But Russell is Mercedes-Benz affiliated, and now we are focusing on our juniors. We see this with Calapinto, for example. He was relatively inexperienced and not very successful in the junior series, although it has to be said that he never had the best teams. But what an incredible performance he's putting in now. And now let's see what our juniors or even Yuki Tsunoda can do. He can also be described as a junior. Really?
He can?
Yeah, not in my book, pal. But as I mentioned earlier, how does he compare to Lawson? End quote. So it's a whole interesting thing here. So if you kind of connect the dots here, he's saying what I kind of posited in the first story, which is how many of these young drivers are just languishing around the paddock as reserve drivers and stuff that could pop in and be fit for purpose, like Calapinto, Bierman, and those guys, right? And he's saying, yeah, well, George is a good guy and all, but we're going to start taking a more serious look at our junior drivers, which isn't that what RB is supposed to be doing all along?
Yeah, you have 100 of them, literally.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Take a look at them. I mean, I think the thing is that whatever your junior series is, and this happens in all sports in some ways, but I think it's more so in motorsports. But we need like a combine, like a football, like the NFL combine, but for racing drivers, right? Like,
yeah, right.
Watching them in F2 and F3, just like watching Moto 3 and Moto 2, doesn't necessarily mean MotoGP success, right? So I think, again, unlike other sports where you can watch them in the junior leagues, and even though the switch from college football to NFL, some people flame out, right? That doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
But I think in motorsports, part of the problem is that I don't know, it's really hard to assess their talent at the lower levels to know that they're going to be successful at the top level.
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think
right.
that's just very true across motorsports in general. I think his Yuki Tsunoda comment is a red herring. We know what Yuki's capable of. We're watching him now for several seasons in a car. You're either pro Yuki or you're not at this point.
Right.
Marco. I don't know
right.
why you think he's a junior. You're either
well,
put him in that other seat or not.
Yeah, it's interesting because then he must have caught himself in this comment, because then he continues. He goes, Calapinto is definitely someone for the future. What he showed in Baku and in Singapore was very, very good. But I gave that as an example.
Oh.
You could also mention Bierman, who shows that the juniors in Formula 2 have the potential to impress in Formula 1. Therefore, contrary to the past, as the top team, you don't necessarily need drivers that already have 3 or 5 years worth of experience. End quote. I think he was sort of thinking, okay, well, everybody I'm talking about isn't part of our junior program.
I was going to say it's the Spinal Tap, right? Like, what city are we in? Yay, Cleveland or whatever,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Like, that he's just looking at him. Who are our drivers? Oh, I should mention them.
Right, right. So, if there's a throng of young talent that needs less experience to be an F1, perhaps we should do what Paul says and take a long, hard look at F2 and F3 as a series and what it does, as well as ways to get more reserve drivers into testing, free practice maybe, even possible sprint races, or then there's that novel idea you could bring more teams into F1, like, say, I don't know, Andretti?
All right. But even at that, let's say we do bring in some more teams. It's still going to be 25? I mean, there's not that many more teams we could add, right? NASCAR is at we used to have 42. We can't have that many, right? So
yeah, another team would be 22 and 2 teams would be 24, yeah.
Right. So I picked 25, right? But anyway, even if there's just not it's not suddenly we're going to add 60 teams or 60 seats, right? So even if we do add a team or 2, you're still never going to solve this problem of you're going to have 6 times as many drivers as you have seats to ever put them in. And then nobody wants to take a single year contract, and you're going to have people that race until they're 40. These things just aren't going to add up.
Right.
So you can want there to be more teams, but it's still not really going to solve your problem, because even just in this conversation, you've mentioned five or six drivers that could be on the grid, and the people rate highly, whatever that means, and think should have a seat, that aren't going to get a seat and may never get a seat.
Yeah, maybe. Hey, Grace, maybe what they could do is these drivers that are in F2 that are under the junior program of one of the major teams, Maybe what they could do is whatever points that driver scores in F2 gets added to the constructors total in F1. All of a sudden, you'd see some folks from the F1 team hopping over to those other garages saying, no, put this like this. No, here's the brake disc. No, the wing's got to go like this. They'd be over there working real close with F2 then.
So that's the thing, right? Because that's part of the problem, I don't know, with F2 and F3 is that those are separate teams, right? It's not like Ferrari runs an F2 team and an F3 team and a Formula 1 team.
Right.
Those are other teams that are running those cars. And so,
owned by other people, yeah.
I mean, I think it's the question of, like, what if Mick Schumacher never rides in another Formula 1 car again? What do we make of his career?
Yes.
He was at Haas. Right? Like, so how do I ever assess, is Mick Schumacher a good driver or not? So that's the same question we're asking here. But these people have never been in Formula 1. I mean, Lawson has, so we have some experience, and Calapinto has, and we have some experience.
Behrman has, yeah.
Right. You get some practice, same things with doing. But if you have somebody that's never really, in earnest, been in Formula 1, how do we rate that? How do we know? Other than just, Martin Brundle said they deserve a ride. Toto Wolff talks about Kimi Antonelli all the time. He must be good. And I think that's part of the problem that, as a fan, I certainly don't have insight into what is a good driver or a bad driver, especially if they never raced in Formula 1, knowing that those junior series don't necessarily mean anything.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking just not team points, whatever points the driver themselves scores, driver's points are added to the constructors in F1. Yeah, because they're different teams. They're not owned by the same group.
No, that's right. No.
But if a driver really drives out of their skin and scores points, then you could add that over there as a bonus.
So it's kind of like becomes money.
Yeah.
You bring this much money
and
this
points.
many points with you.
That's right.
It's just another component to add to your equation. But I think that it's hard to assess that kind of talent.
It is.
So I think that
really
would be. Because even at that, like when you look at test data, I can't look at the data sheet and say, oh, see right here, Sergio is so much better than Max Verstappen in this turn. I don't know. Somebody has to tell me that and show me how to interpret the data. I'm not an engineer. And same thing with corners, right? Like you're not at a track watching a driver. I think television is better now to assess that. But in the old days, you used to be like, I don't know, people talk about Mika Hakkinen. I guess he's good. I don't know why he's good necessarily. Right?
He was good.
Yeah, I've heard of him. I've heard some good things. But even at that, just winning a world championship doesn't mean you're good. So I think that's a bigger question is like, how do you as a fan at home, other than just Martin Brundle said so or somebody said so, assess his talent? Right. But then it's even harder with a junior driver because they're in some series that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be good.
It is. I would say, though, that just to add to that, I think there's some folks been doing this a long time. I think, and they can generally tell talent in what they're doing. I go back, and I mentioned this a couple podcasts ago with Paul in the interview, and I totally apologize. I cannot remember the media outlet that interviewed him, and I need to give them a hat tip, and I cannot remember for the life of me who you guys were, so apologies. But they did a long-form interview with Adrian, and Adrian said when they were talking about Max, he said he was incredibly misunderstood, but he was talking about his mental capacity to do everything that's going on in a race, everything inside the car, everything with strategy, everything with on-track battles, everything with braking, accelerating, saving tires, saving all the details that he does, and he still has massive brain capacity beyond that. And he said, he made the comment that, when you've been doing this a long time, you can walk up and down the paddock and you can instantly tell who's got that capacity and who doesn't. And as an F1 team boss, we all know that, and I got to thinking about that. And he's right. And I think there are drivers on there that have massive capacity beyond just the championship drive. And, so I would say, to your point, it is hard to assess that in F2, especially if they're not driving around the best car, and you got to take that factor in. But I think, the folks in the F1 teams have been looking at a lot of talent for a long time, and perhaps they could tell. I would argue that, but then all of a sudden they'll bring up a driver that just like a Logan Sargent, right? And you think, well, certainly they would have been doing all the numbers. They would have been reading the hero cards. They would have been going through all of the data and everything. And they came to the conclusion that he's fit for F1, and they let him go mid-season, And so how does that happen? Was your picker broke? Did you take him because you needed the cash more than the data and the performance?
You only have so many options.
You do,
especially if you're Williams, right?
Yeah. Ferrari not so much, but Williams, yes.
Your pickings are slim, and again, right? It depends on what the other person will agree to as well, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
Maybe there were other drivers they could have picked, but they were like, we're not amenable to what you're going to offer us, Williams. We demand better espresso machines. So
we want swing line staplers.
Yeah, absolutely. Only the best, man. Only the best. And so I think that it is interesting, but there's a lot of different components that you're trying to weigh here in order to find the perfect balance that'll work for your team and, meets all those, checks all those boxes. And it isn't just talent, right? That's always been the case. I don't think many things are meritocracy, but Formula One for sure isn't because there's just too many things.
Absolutely.
It's not just your talent.
Nope.
I mean, many would argue that Ricciardo stayed along I think Red Bull kept him for sure because Max hates doing all the media stuff and he is not great. I think if he wanted to do the media things, he could do them and would be great, but he doesn't want to. So then he's not great at them.
Same for Kimi, right? Kimi was the same way. Hated it.
I don't know. Right. But Kimi was so bad at it that it was great. He was like a B movie, right? It was so ridiculous and it was great.
It was so bad, right? It was great. Yeah.
Right. But so you keep somebody like Ricciardo on because they're willing to do all that and they're good at it and their personality. And, most of the time people mention, oh, I like Dan. Why do you like Dan? Oh, because he's fun. He's funny. Oh, he's always smiling, right? None of those are how he drives.
Right. And now they got Yuki.
He's got personality.
He's got charisma. So what does 2025 look like? What do we know so far? At McLaren, we got Lando and Oscar.
Yep.
At Red Bull, technically, you got Max and Sergio.
Technically.
At Ferrari, you got Lewis and Charles.
Yeah.
Right? Or Charles. At Mercedes, you got George and Kimi Antonelli.
Right.
At Aston Martin, you got Fernando. And who? Lance Stroll.
Unfortunately.
Right? Oh. At RB, you got Yuki and who? Question mark. Open seat. Right? At Haas, you have Esteban Ocon and Ollie Behrman. At Williams, you got Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz. Not Franco Colapinto.
No.
At Alpine, you got Pierre Gasly and Jack Doohan. Right? And at Sauber, lastly, you got Nico Hulkenberg and nobody. So there's only two seats, technically available. And to be honest with you, Grace, I'm not 100% sure or convinced that Perez is safe at Red Bull. And if Lawson does well, he may find himself in that seat, leaving potentially an empty seat at RB. And I would even argue they should empty both of those seats and bring in two new drivers.
Okay. Well, I don't support that decision.
I know you don't because you're a Yuki fan.
And I also don't think that's great to bring in two new drivers. That's never a good idea either.
It worked well for Haas.
Yeah. I mean, I was just looking at that, seeing Esteban's name, in print. Right, because you put the block in the notes so that I don't have to, rely on my memory to remember where everybody's going for next year, which I definitely appreciate. But Esteban Ocon at Haas just is I know,
it's weird,
where
isn't
that guy's career is man, this is not where, before he came into Formula, this should be, Esteban Ocon should be a lesson to all those young names that those young guys that you just named. This is what could happen to you. So tread carefully, guys. This is not where we thought Ocon was going to end up at this point in his career.
Yeah, you could say, look, here's Esteban from his humble beginnings as a street mime in Tupelo, Mississippi. Look, he rose to fame, and now he's at Haas.
Right. I just
don't let that happen to you.
Yeah, don't be Ocon. You should ask him a lot of questions. You don't want to go down that
Right.
You don't want to go down that pathway. So, but I think that, again, I think Sauber should stick with Valtteri Bottas. But I don't know then why haven't they signed him, right? Like, unless it is a contract, because I could see that he wants more than 1 year and they only
they could be haggling that out.
They're kind of stuck with Hülkenberg. I mean, that's not who Bonato brought in, right? That was under Seidel, but I would just want to keep somebody consistent, because then you would be able to know what you were like and what you are like now, because you could hold Bottas relatively as a constant as much as you can hold a driver as a constant.
True, although I would say with the experience Nico's got, he would be a great bellwether for that team. They wouldn't need Valtteri.
No.
You know, and I'm not trying to be unfair to the Ukester. To be fair to him, in his defense, he's beaten Dan, he's beaten Nick DeVries, and it was close with Liam, right? And I think that's what was so impressive about Liam, is he came in and he was on par and beat Yuki a few times, and I think that's why he's getting a seat. But does that mean Yuki is being overlooked? And this may be a stretch, but I think while he's a feisty driver, I do think he might be a challenge to work with. Judging by his radio messages, if that's anything to go by, I think there's a residue with him, and I think it's hard to regain. You've got to have that whole team on your side, and when you go in F-bomb them and tell them they're all screwing up, you're going to alienate people on that team. And he probably didn't realize that at the time. And I don't know if the whole team is, I'm assuming they've all gotten past that and rallied around him, and he's the bestest and greatest. But anyway, yeah. So not trying to be unfair with him.
But I think the thing is with Yuki is that at some point, so we were talking about how like Danny Rick was pushed out because of Lawson's contract, right? At some point, or at least that was what was rumored, right? That they had to make a decision. They either had to sign Liam or let him go. Like at some point, Yuki has to be like, you can either keep me middling around here at your second team, or you could actually let me go, or you could bring me to Red Bull. Like at some point, I can't imagine as a driver, he's just okay with middling around at, their second team. So at some point, he also is going to want more, whether it comes
the Ukester wants more.
Always.
And he feels he deserves it. Hey,
they all do.
Speaking of more, but actually getting less. So going with this whole theme, the theme of this podcast is all the junior drivers, right? We're talking about Calapinto, we're talking about Red Bull's drivers, talking about all this stuff and open seats and what's left and all of that good stuff. Well, the F1, the folks at F1 and the F1 Commission. The F1 Commission consists of teams, the F1 group, and you ask for miracles, I give you the FIA.
That's right.
That's the F1 Commission. So they all had a good idea. They thought, what about at the end of the season at Abu Dhabi, after the Grand Prix, what about having an all-rookie race?
Yeah, right.
So after all this talk about young drivers, talent and the lack of running in F1, they were considering an end-of-season sprint-style event at Abu Dhabi in which the young drivers... Go ahead, what?
Oh, I was just going to say, because this goes back to my, we don't have a combine although the combine has its issues. But, right, this is as close as you could get to Formula One combine, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they thought we could get all the young drivers, and they would race to show that they've got the chops to be in F1. Right. Everybody get a good look at them in F1 machinery. Not F2, but F1. So after a meeting with the F1 Commission, they decided more time was needed. More time. Yes. More time was needed to iron out the details and make sure it works as well as it possibly can. Here's what the quote said. While the concept received widespread support, it was determined that due to timing and organizational constraints, the event would not take place in 2024, and discussions would continue to formulate a potential concept and plan for 2025. So there you go. The teams, FIA and F1, felt the idea was being rushed and they needed to slow it down and really consider the details. The intent now is to do the event in 2025. And the concern was that these young drivers were getting little to no seat time in the cars. So, yeah, with no testing program or meaningful mileage, you can see why. So perhaps these sprint races could be junior drivers too, right? You might say that. So they're right. There's no seat time and all that. So instead of having just this rookie race, I mean, why not just do the sprint races and do those junior drivers? But the problem there is they're all junior drivers, and there's going to be a lot of carnage and a lot of damaged cars, and that's going to be super expensive, and that could impact their actual qualifying or could impact the actual race, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants anybody to jump in Lewis's Ferrari and go put that in the wall and have a complete rebuild, and Lewis is on the outside looking in. So that doesn't work. So maybe this rookie race once a year is all we might get. Okay, whatever.
I miss the days of what was it, like the mid-2010? I don't know. Anyway, when they used to have Friday drivers, right? Like Ant Davidson, right? Like, so you would have somebody that had a much more
PDR,
role in the team that would do much more of your practice and your setup on Friday.
The mule work.
And they don't have that now. And so that's to me where you used to be like, oh, that guy, he did McLaren's work on Friday, or he did Ferrari's Friday work. I've heard of him. I can see what he's doing, right? Like, I can have some sense of who this person might be. And that's just gone. They just don't do any of that anymore. So
yeah, that's that young phenom Marc Genet.
Yeah, the young guy.
Young guy. Yeah, they used to have that, certainly, and then testing was really where all that would shake down, right? All that testing, they'd have their junior drivers in pounding out mileage. It was just, and you actually got to learn quite a bit of it about the drivers themselves, and they actually did really well, and got a lot of mileage in an F1 car.
Right, and so that would solve
just
that
go
problem,
back to testing.
You could have. Right, so you could have your Friday drivers, they would do more, and then you would have a little bit less risk come doing something like a rookie race or a rookie sprint or whatever.
Right.
Because it would not be their first time in the car. Because I agree, there's no amount of money that I'm like, even though, because the rookie race was supposed to happen after all the Formula One racing. So, like, if they crashed, it wasn't like it was going to ruin, Fernando's day or something like that. They wouldn't have to rebuild somebody's car, but still, that's still money that the team has to deal with, and they're gonna have to send those parts back to Brackley and gorilla glue them back together.
Right.
So I get that. I wouldn't want, especially with the cost cap, I wouldn't want that either. But there has to be some way to get them experience that isn't. I don't know. I just think. More testing. I guess I'm for more testing. Why wouldn't
it all comes down to testing.
That's just more. Listen, Stefano, meet me over on camera too, right? Like, this would solve a lot of your problems. Just have more testing, problem solved.
Right.
Cost cap, whatever.
Have your preseason testing. Yeah. Have your mid-season testing just before the summer break. So whatever you learn, you can't really do anything for 3 weeks. And then, at the end of the season testing, maybe 3 good tests, right?
Yeah, problem solved.
Who knew? All right. So that's that. Let's see. Some Albin's Cats. That seems good. Little Albin's Cats. I used to have, I don't know. Do I have that anymore? Yes, it's that time for Albin's Cats, where Grace tells us about all the fun stuff she finds on the interwebs. And we even read a few no-shit headlines. Oh, I'm sorry. We even read some headlines. There we
go. So I'm going to keep with the young guns theme here.
Yeah, right? Good.
So I have for my my Albon's Cats, because of course we're sort of in this autumn break, sort of in yet another lull for news. But I did want to give a shout out to Moto3 champion, David Alonso. You may remember him from earlier where because of course his last name is Alonso. How am I not on
of course.
this, right? Right. But So David Alonso won the Moto3 championship with still 4 more races to go. He's won 10. They refer to him as Baby Goat because if he wins 2 more races in Moto3, he will tie Valentino Rossi, who is like the goat, right? So there's been a lot of buzz around him, and he's a very, very smart chap. I think what you were talking about earlier about how, the like grizzled veterans in the paddock, they know how to find talent, right? So it was interesting because he's close with Bagnaia and with Marc Marquez and Fabio Quartararo, and so then like after the Moto3 they were like watching the race from the paddock, and so there's been a lot of buzz, and they asked him in the interview, and Pecco was like, he asked me what I eat for breakfast. Like that guy's always asking me questions, and not in a like that younger brother's a menace kind of way, but just like he's really always trying to find a way to like, oh, granola, that's what I should be eating. Like, how can I wait? Like every point of his life, he's trying to get into MotoGP. And when they asked about Davide about it, he was like, well, yeah, because they also are all Moto3 champions. They're now in MotoGP, which is of course what I want to do. So how do I get there successfully? Because as we were talking, not everybody goes through Moto3, Moto2, MotoGP successfully. Right. And sometimes there's like, oh, this talent, oh, I can't wait to see this guy. And it just doesn't pan out either because there's not a seat or timing or MotoGP, it's a different bike. It's a totally different situation. Again, kind of like college football versus NFL, right?
Right.
They're great in college and it just doesn't work in the NFL.
It's true.
It's a whole new ball game, if you will. Ball game? I don't know. So
it's true.
Anyway, it was great. And so the Moto3 races have been great this season. Again, that's what I was watching this afternoon instead of football because I got other things to watch still. But keep your eye on this Davide Alonso.
Yes, you just like it because his name's Alonso.
I mean, that doesn't hurt.
En tus oídos, melodía toca. Con guitarra y la orquesta en voz. Dramático en el aire flota.
You like this?
Esto es Fernando Alonso.
Ah, there you go.
Well, I'm a big Magic Fernando fan. So, so I think the other thing is they were talking about so he's Colombian, and this made me think about the Argentinian story earlier that we were talking about the top of the show, was that, Colombians don't really watch motorcycle racing, but they were talking about how at every race you're seeing more and more Colombian flags because they just embrace it, right? This sport, this guy is doing really well in this sport. We don't watch this sport, but we support this guy. And it's just something that I think that Bernie sort of never got with the United States, that's not really my rivalries with Ohio. It's not with Canada, right? Like we're such a big country that I don't have a nation, my nationality isn't my country, it's my state, right? And so my state rivalry isn't the same as your country rivalries, but I was just really interesting that here's Colombia suddenly getting into the sport, and it did remind me of Alonso because Spain really again watches motorcycle racing, not Formula One, but that Alonso guy was everywhere when he first started winning races. So I think that's just more pull for South America and more getting them into MotoGP and hopefully Formula One. So I'm all for more races, and we'll see what Colombia,
you're all about the bricks. You're all about the bricks.
Yeah.
All right. How about some new shit headlines? Shall we do that?
Let's do it.
Okay. The first one is, quote, I've competed against Toto Wolff and Christian Horner. It's clear who is the most annoying, end quote.
I don't know who said this. I'm guessing it's Christian Horner is the winner.
It was. Christian was the winner. Okay. And it was one Gunther Steiner.
Oh, I take that back. Gunther Steiner is the most annoying. He did that finger point
back
to himself.
It was Gunther Steiner saying it about Christian Horner, see?
But I think
you could have reversed it. You're right.
Like the most annoying out of this group is me, right?
Yes.
Like
yeah. I've worked with Christian and Toto, and the most annoying is me.
Right.
That would have been a more accurate statement.
Knowing that it's Gunther Steiner who said that, that's where that actually rests.
Isn't that funny? Yeah, I thought that was
just
funny.
like, who would I want to? I think I mean, Christian would be fine. At least Christian is like straightforward, right? Like I've talked about that. Like at least I know where I stand.
With Christian?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I would know, right? And so I can work with that. I don't have to like you. We're just working together. But I think Gunther Steiner is the most annoying out of those three. So good job, Gunther.
I would agree. Christian's just kind of black and white. It's like happy birthday. It is tomorrow. Okay. He's right. So, it was.
Horner's the second overall most annoying person.
Can't argue with that. It was. I know. Let's see. The next headline is this. Bernie Ecclestone warns Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, quote, magic F1 star will beat them. Who's he talking about? Who could he be talking about? Who is the magic F1 star that Bernie warned Lando and Max that he's going to beat him?
Lewis another time. I don't know. No.
Bernie's done with Lewis.
Oh, he's over that.
That horse is run.
Oscar. I don't know.
Oscar. You're right.
Oscar.
It's Oscar.
That would be my guess.
Yeah, Bernie's super impressed with Oscar. Anthony
right?
says Lance. Yeah, it was Lance.
No, the only way. See, then that's how we know that Bernie and Lawrence Stroll are tight.
Yes, right? If he was. Yes.
If he says Lance, man, you guys are.
Bernie's got some kickback somewhere.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
you need to be looking at his investments because nobody would say that.
That's exactly right.
How is Lance still at that team? At what point hasn't Fernando Alonso said, "Listen, you know what this team needs? A better second driver." How has that never come up in conversation?
Well, I mean, let's be honest.
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
Yeah. Anyway, and finally, the last no-S headline is the stunning influencer at the center of Formula One's love triangle saga, aspiring lawyer 22, is a fashionista TikTok star who split with Ollie Behrman and is now back with his rival Franco Colapinto. Do you see how I brought that all the way around? Started with Franco, and now we're back to Franco.
There were too many words for me to hold that into my short-term memory.
Basically, there was a young woman who's a big TikTok star, who's an attorney or aspiring lawyer, and she was going out with Franco, and then she left. And then she was dating Ollie Behrman for a while, and now she left Ollie Behrman, and she's back with Franco. This is turning into like a Daniel Kvyat, Max Verstappen thing.
I was just gonna say, right? Like,
yeah.
Oh, the torpedo. It's all over again.
Yes. Who knew the drama? And it's not even the stalwart F1 drivers. This is the young guns coming in, already full of drama. People stealing people's girlfriends and stuff. This is crazy talk.
Way to go, Michael Schumacher.
Yeah. You started this with Karina.
I learned it from watching you, man. That's right.
Yeah, it's like the 80s Don't Do Drugs commercial.
Exactly. That's a very niche reference.
Yeah, well, it's a very Gen X reference, but I got it.
Very good, thanks.
Yes.
I always appreciate when, especially I work remote now, so it's very much like this. When I see at least somebody like, okay, I like that. I was like, good, at least one person here got my joke.
I know. It's like, in Gen X, you have this complete hidden language, like where's the beef, or, how many licks does it take, or, all these things are Gen X, steeped in Gen X lore.
Kids these days have no idea.
They won't know. Anyway,
they don't know what it's like to have to push a button 3 times in order to send one letter for a text message, right?
Yeah, predictive text and all that. Yeah, and on the Trio.
Yeah. Although I think predictive text gaslights me the most. I now look back at messages and I'm like, I don't know where the problem is. That what I typed? Is that what you typed? Like what?
No.
This text message makes no sense, but I don't know if
I know
I should be concerned or not, right? I
know it's crazy.
It's terrible.
It is terrible. All right. Well, that does it for this podcast. Is what we think about the news.
Todd's like, Grace, that's enough.
No, I agree with it, but what are you going to do? I can't fix it all. I'm trying to fix the junior driver program here.
I don't know, or change words that were words into other words. No,
I know. I've sent whole text
words.
messages that I didn't even think. I don't even know how that came out of my head.
It's not the word.
I don't know.
I typed a word.
I'm like,
Spell check.
I'll send my daughter a text, and later, she's like question marks, like WTH. And I look at it and it says, "Hey, have you found a Ford 351 Cleveland with a 4-barrel in it?" And I was like, what? I didn't even say that.
I was just trying to ask if you fed the dogs.
Right? I was trying to say, yeah. Did you empty the litter box? That's
right,
what. What is going on here?
I don't know. I question everything. I never
question
know,
it all.
There you go.
So anyway, all right. Well, that does it for this
Very
podcast.
good.
A huge thank you to our Patreon supporters who joined us for this call. Had a great dialogue, great stuff. It's great to have you guys with us and sharing your thoughts and everything, and really enjoy it as always. Thank you for joining us. Sorry for the switch in times that we record. Normally we do on Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Grace. But anyway, if you like this podcast, well, go give it some love. Give it a good rating on your favorite podcast. Share it with a family member. Tell a friend about it. Share it on social media. Why not do that? I mean, that doesn't take a lot, does it? Just kind of share it, Put it out there. Unless you're embarrassed about us and you don't want people to know you listen to us. I mean, I get that. I understand. But or you can...
Stefano Dominicali.
He doesn't tweet us. He doesn't want people to know. He doesn't want people to know he listens to us.
Every time we put it, you see what happens to the Junior Series next year. Why? Because he listens to the show.
He listens.
You just wait.
You'll know. You'll know.
That's right.
Also, if you want to weigh in, you can do that at theparkforme.com. Share your opinion. Just do it with decorum and civility, as always. What does that mean? I don't know. Gotta have to look that up. I had to look it up. Back in 2005 when I started this.
Don't be jerk faces.
That's it. Yeah.
You can disagree with opinions, but not with people.
Exactly.
Don't make it personal.
Not a big deal. Not a big deal.
Nice.
Disagree.
Right.
And we will be back. As always, we'll be back next week doing this all over again. And so until that time when we come back next week to do it all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camera, saying so long, Grace.
See you next week.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.